time to introduce our chairperson, who will speak until approximately 12:20, sharing her experience, strength, and hope. I would like to introduce Joyce.
Oh, thanks. I'm Joyce, and I'm an alcoholic. I also just got the wind knocked out of me, I think. Last night I was at my home group, and it's always hard when your birthday comes at the end of the month, and they designate a month. This is August, but it's not really my birthday yet, but I'm not going to celebrate in September, so what do you do? And so last night I announced at home group that if I stayed sober, I think 5 more hours. So everybody was probably watching their clock at midnight to see if I made it. My daughter is disabled, and she's 41 years sober, and she's out in a studio apartment that we built for her, and so I stayed up until 12:01 so she could be the first one to tell me happy birthday. Wow. Well, I belong here. And I have the only requirement for membership, and that is a sincere desire to stop drinking and stay stopped. And thank God, finally, I came to my first meeting December 19th, 1966. And I went to meetings, I read the book, I worked the steps, I had a sponsor. I sponsored people, I started a group, I helped start a conference, and I drank intermittently through all of that. One of the times while we were working on the Southwest Kansas Conference, I got drunk 3 times in that year, but I didn't quit working on it, so I guess I thought that was okay. Well, my sponsor told me if you can't stop doing the wrong things, don't stop doing the right things, because right will always prevail. And I believe that. I kept coming back, I kept doing what I was told, and never one time did I not have a desire to stop drinking. My story is not about unwillingness or rebellion or fighting anything. My story is about not having the capacity to grasp and develop what it took to stay here. I have a special place in my heart for relapsers. So if there's any of you out there, I love you a little bit more than I love everybody else. Because I know what that felt like. I know what that was like to get to the last house on the block, and then I didn't fit there either. So keep coming back was my salvation. The longer that I came back to AA and had the repetition, probably the love, the acceptance, the whole 9 yards, I would guess, my brain got healed enough to be able to hang on to what I needed to do to process a program. And if you think it doesn't take a brain, don't have one for a while and see if that's not true. So it was under the lash of alcoholism that all my story, it took me through my story, but not one part of my story is what qualifies me to be here. It's just my story. And my story is that I was born on a turkey farm in 1941, the oldest of 8 kids, the daughter of an alcoholic father, grandfather, uncles, 5 generations that I know of. And then my mother was a hardcore, born-again, spirit-filled, speaking in tongues, Bible-thumping Christian. At least that's what she said. And that was very confusing to me. I had real twisted teaching and experience about values. Not saying something was a lie in my household. If you didn't speak up, then you were lying. Just twisted value system. So I didn't have a chance from the start. I thought that my first drink was when I thought my first drink was, and that was somewhere in my early 20s. I found out later that my mom used to say, I'm just going to give you to your dad. He can always get you to settle down and go to sleep. Well, I found out generations later from my grandmother that my mom thought my dad was putting apple juice in my baby bottle and he was putting whiskey. So no wonder he could get me to go to sleep. So I was getting zonked out when I was 3 months old. But what I want to talk more about, how in the world do you talk about 50 years in 10 minutes? It can be done, I guess, by somebody better than me, but So what I want to do with that 3 minutes or so is just make it clear that I do belong here. I have the only requirement to belong here, and I don't have any part of my experience, with or without strength and hope, that I'm not willing to share when appropriate. There are times like this when it would not be appropriate to share some of those things, but suffice it to say that I know pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization, as most of us do, at whatever level we have that. I doubt if there's anybody in this room that hasn't experienced that, even if you don't know that's what it is. And if you're in love with it, you'll probably fall out of love with it by the time it beats the crap out of you. I know I did. I used to be proud of some of my demoralization. I was a hard-ass, tough broad, and today that is so repulsive to me, for me. I don't want those hard edges, and I don't want that, you're not going to get close to me. I didn't want to get close to people because I didn't want to lose people. I thought it was because they would abandon me. I also did not know that I wouldn't let people close to me because I thought they might die or leave or whatever. And that's a form of abandonment, I guess, but it wasn't like I was afraid to let people close to me for good reasons. My dad carried me into my first meeting. I got married, had 2.3 kids, the white picket fence, the car out front. It was repossessed, but there was a car out there. And the house was an old train boxcar that my granddad owned and threw on a piece of dirt in Syracuse, Kansas, but it was a house and I owned it. But my bottom came when I was, before the civil rights, I was institutionalized in one institution after another for over 5 years until the civil rights movement booted us all out of the nut wards, and I came out a very damaged woman. There I had shock treatments. People, they did to us anything they wanted to do, and I won't go into any depth to describe that, except to say that one of the most horrific things that happened to me was a through the eye socket lobotomy, which really scrambled my brain. So indeed, I am a miracle that I can grasp and develop what it takes to stay here. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm glad my dad was only 4th grade educated, because I don't think anybody with more education than that would have thought it was okay to put a 230-pound, 24-year-old woman up on a table in an AA meeting and say, I'm bringing her to her first meeting. I mean, I had cut my hair all off, I had peed my pants a few times, and I came to on that table, and I didn't even know where I was. I'd been to AA meetings before because my dad got so, my first AA meeting was in 1955. I came to the meetings with my dad, and 11 years later, how would I know that he would be laying me up on a table for me? And from there, my journey began. I was the only woman in the first 5 groups that I was in. I was the only young people, and I was young. I was 24, and I finally got sober, I think, just before I turned 27. Well, I drank for 2 years and 9 months, so you can do the math. And I had a Genghis Khan sponsor. I mean, she was big book all the way. And I always say this, the problem with this program for me was it was almost too simple. I mean, just to follow these simple directions. Read the book, answer the questions. My sponsor was strong on questions. She goes, they don't put a question mark there to design the page. It's a question. Answer the question. The second time she took me through the steps, she also took me through the steps in the 12 steps and 12 traditions. And if you haven't worked the steps through the 12 steps and 12 traditions, give it a whirl. It's a whole different experience. Not to replace the directions, the basic text. I would never, ever do that. But I didn't have the only battle I had with the big book that was just gut-wrenching and I built a resentment on was the doctor's opinion, where it talks about the types of alcoholics. And it talks about the manic depressive and at length about who was probably, I love this one, probably the least understood by his friends. And I went, that's me. And about whom a whole chapter could probably have been written. And so I went looking for the chapter to the manic depressive, who's the least understood by her friends, and I did not find it. So I wrote to New York to Bill W. and kind of blatantly asked, why would you talk about a chapter that probably could have been written and not write it? That's just nonsense. Don't mention it then. If you're not going to write it, don't frickin' talk about it. And he sent me a really kind of nice letter back and said, Joyce, I would like to suggest that you read what we did write and see if that helps you. And I went, oh, okay, I can do that. I still kind of resent that there's no chapter to the manic depressive, but I'm over it. I mean, I slip down into that once in a while, but I'm basically over it. I've ceased fighting. I ceased fighting the language in the book. I've ceased fighting the thee, thou, and thy. I don't have a bad thing going on with God. I don't have acceptance is not the answer to all my problems. I'm glad that's not in the text. It's just in a story, because I need courage. I need wisdom. I need a nice balance of acceptance, courage, and wisdom. And I feel like I have that. I'll wrap it up with this. I woke up this morning, at 12:01, I stayed up so that I could let my daughter wish me a happy birthday. And I went to sleep, and then I woke up, waking up, like at 7 o'clock-ish. And I said, the best way I can describe how I feel, because I'll tell you, it doesn't feel like just any other day to me, any more than your wedding day, or the day you gave birth to your kids, or the day you paid off the house. And I said, I feel like I just paid off my car and got the deed to the house. And that feels good. Yeah. And I want to thank everybody that's in the room. I have some special people in the room, like we all have special people. And this is a special day. Thanks.